Hey guys, welcome back to part 3 of the video series. In this episode, we were supposed to go and get a painting lesson, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, we couldn't go ahead with that. So instead, we're going to be showing off our armies again, but this time we're going to explain a little bit more about what we like about painting and how we came about to picking our color scheme for the armies. So let's get right to it. So first off, let's get to know a little bit more about what painting is to us and how we learned how to paint. So first off, we'll start off with Dash.
So, today's episode is all about painting, and I'm going to be telling you about how I started. I started by just grabbing base paints and slapping it on, seeing what works. Abaddon Black, Retributor Gold. I just started seeing what would go where and how I could have fun, basically. Over time, I have gone to different YouTube channels, Twitch streams, and I've even learned from some of the people in the store. So I think slowly I have been getting a bit better. Some people might ask, how do you get through painting so many different models? Well, personally, I start with, for example, I would go with 5 Fire Warriors, and then 1 big model, and then another Fire Warrior group, and then another big model, just to keep my enjoyment and entertainment high. I think the most enjoyable part of painting is the experimental phase, just seeing what works, seeing different colors, what themes might work out, and yeah.
Hey guys, so first question, where and who did I learn to paint from? The person I used to learn to paint from, or the first person I watched painting, was Mr. Duncan Rhodes. He's a really good painter and he paints for Warhammer community previously. Right now, I think he has his own website and you guys should definitely go check it out at Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy. Alright guys, so the second question is, how do I go about painting units with multiple models inside? That's a good question. I used to be a Space Marine player, or rather I am half a Space Marine player, and I do have some units with multiple models inside. So what I like to do is I will use the assembly line technique to go about doing such things. For example, I have a squad of 10 Assault Intercessors. What I'll do is I will spray all of them with Macrack Blue Spray as the priming step before moving on to the next. And what this does is that it increases efficiency in a lot of ways. Instead of finishing one model one by one, you actually can finish 10 at one go as long as you finish the steps. The last question is, what do you find tedious or enjoyable about painting? Well, I really like painting. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I really find awesome about it. And it's when you finish a miniature, you get to take it all in. You take one good look at your effort, and I feel that if you really put your heart and soul into it, no matter how it looks, you'll be really satisfied with how it turns out. And I really enjoy that feeling. I enjoy the feeling of completing a miniature and knowing that, hey, there's a little piece of me inside. Cool.
Alright, now to answer the question I posed to the others, myself. So, who or where did I learn to paint from? Well, I learned to paint from Nicholas Wong. He was the one who introduced me to painting. He gave me the painting demo. So I learned the basic steps, which is prime, paint, and then detail. After which you maybe do some washing to give it a little bit more depth instead of just a flat looking model. So that is how I learned to paint. So the next question is, what is my strategy behind painting units that have multiple models in it? For example, in my case would be the Skitari. So the Skitari have like 10 models in a unit. So how would you come about painting all that, right? So I would prime everything the same color first, all 10 of them. Then I would go on to do one color at a time, because I think it's easier to make sure that each model has the same color before you move on to the detailing, unlike those models that have single model units that you'd only need to paint one of unless you have multiple. But even then, you would paint one at a time. So that's the general gist of how I paint multiple models. And finally, what do I find tedious or enjoyable about painting? Well, for me, I don't really find anything too tedious, except for the fact that, you have to be super detailed, but that's beside the point. The enjoyable part for me is the fact that I get to create something of my own, and it will be unique. It will be unlike any other. Maybe it's a little bit copied here and there because it took inspiration from the internet, but I like the therapeutic feeling I have when I painting. That is the part that I enjoy the most about painting. Yeah. Alright, now that everyone's had their say about what they feel about painting, let's go on to learning about how each one of us came up with our army's colors. Take it away, Dash.
So, now I'll tell you how I painted my Necrons. For my Necrons color scheme, I went with jade and gold and red. I did this because I was inspired by Kung Fu Panda 3 and Kai's Jade Soldiers. I thought it was really cool and that the thematics matched really well because they were kind of both brainless, undead, mindless warriors. So I started painting was with a Chaos Black primer spray. After that, I moved on to a Zenithal with Brazier. And Zenithal is basically spraying from the zenith of the sun. So basically you start at maybe a 0 and move on to like a 45-degree angle. You get a nice gradient of white to black. After that, I moved on and sprayed Vallejo Green Ink Verde, and that gave my nice jade base tone. After that, I started moving into the intricacies and the detailing with Retributed Gold Armor. I then painted all of the energy parts of a white base layer, and then moved on to spraying it with Angron Red for the energy. I also did some contrast painting with the airbrush color on the energy swords to give a nice kind of effect to them. And for my basing, I started with one layer of Retributed Gold Armor, another layer of Art Coat, and finally a layer of the technical Mordant Earth, which cracks up as it dries and kind of reveals bits of gold in the cracks and looks like rocky terrain. And that's how I paint.
So, you guys know that I am starting Custodes. You guys have seen my Solar Watch models. The Solar Watch models are made up of bone armor, blue color highlights such as the plume and the cloaks. But what you guys didn't know is that I'm actually going to have a second detachment of Custodes inside my army at 2000 points, and there's going to be a Dread Host contingent. So the Dread Host is a little more like your bread and butter Custodes, and that's because they are golden all over with red highlights. Next, how I paint this color? Well, it's actually really easy. For the Dread Host, all you have to do is prime Retributor armor. That's your basic gold spray, gold primer for Custodes, and I really recommend it. It makes your job so much easier than having to paintbrush it all over. And following that, what I do is I'll use Liberator Gold, this time with a brush, to highlight all of the intricate details in the Custodes armor, and trust me, there are a lot. Next, for the cloak, the plume, and all the other bits of armor that are non-metallic, I will use a combination of Mephiston Red and Corn Red to make it reddish. Yeah, but what this does is you'll get a Custodes that looks more like your stock Custodes, but trust me, they are Dread Hosts. Finally, how do I do my basing? So you guys might or might not already know that I am doing Frozen Methane for my base theme. For all my Custodes, they are going to be standing on what looks like cracked blue lava. And how I do this is actually really, really simple. All I do is I'll take Baharoth blue and first coat one layer of Baharoth blue all over your miniature base. Next, you can put Modern Earth all over it in droplets or anything, and make sure that you dry it with a hairdryer so that it has that nice crackling effect. And lastly, if you would like, you can put bits of foam or bits of cork all over the base, and what that does is it's gonna give you this little platform for your miniatures to stand on, and it's just a little bit of added detail that you can spray black, you can paint it however you want, and it's just gonna add so much depth into your miniature.
Okay, now it's my turn to kind of give the full detail of how I came about my own color scheme. So my army's color scheme is in the color scheme of Stygius State, a Forge world in the Adeptus Mechanicus world, but I kind of drew inspiration from it and made it a little bit my own. So that's how I came up with the color scheme. Now I will explain how I go about doing this whole process. Firstly, prime, of course, as everyone will do. Most cases I decide to prime Lead Belcher, so that's gonna be the base of it. Then I go on to painting the most prominent colors, like I mentioned previously, where I would paint black first. So I would paint most of the blacks in, and then I get a couple of layers in, let that dry. And then once I go with that, I go into the next detail. So sometimes I would go with the details that are a little bit smaller on the models first, and then I would go on to each and every detail. Because my models are so uniquely detailed, even though I know they're small, I kind of like detailing them. So I go through the details step by step. So either I go with the next most prominent color from black, or I go on to the metallics. So I go metallics first, and then maybe after the metallics I go on to the other detailing, like the blacks on their clothing, the blacks on the guns. I just add in the detailing along the way. Those are my steps really. And then at the end of it, I just finish it off with the final details. And then that's how my model looks. I make sure that everything has this little unique color. Not too colorful, but unique. Finally comes the basing. So with the basing, I was a little bit more basic than Sam and Dash. I just decided, you know what, I will just use Mars. This army hails from Mars. So I just decided to use a technical code called Martian Iron. I just slather it on the base, fix the sides, and that is it. That is my base. It looks pretty cool. I like it. I haven't thought about adding any other pieces of rock or earth or some item on their base. So mine is just a basic Martian Iron, and that is how I paint my army. Thank you guys again for watching the video. I hope you liked it. Links to the socials and anything else that you need down below. See you in the next part.